There was a time when Atari was on top of the world. Atari was the company that made gaming what it is today, a multi-billion-dollar industry that consistently outsells every film in theaters at that time. Atari is responsible for behemoth titles such as Pong, Breakout, Yar's Revenge, Alone in the Dark, and many, many more. But nowadays, Atari has been a shell of its former self, just barely holding on thanks to nostalgia. It's bizarre seeing a company that at one point was the pioneer of electronic entertainment devolving into putting out terrible, unfinished games like Roller Coaster Tycoon World, a bug-ridden, unfinished installment of the Roller Coaster Tycoon franchise that was stuck in development hell for many, many years, that was rushed out of early access to meet the release date of its superior competitor Planet Coaster. And not to mention Alone in the Dark Illumination, a half-baked co-op survival horror game that completely contradicts the name of the series, Alone in the Dark. More recently though, the company has come under fire for two separate crowdfunding campaigns they've put out. The first one was the announcement of the Atari box, Atari's triumphant return into the console business. They announced the system around June of 2017, but haven't said anything about it since, other than the fact that it's a Linux machine being powered by an AMD chip similar to the Tegra chip in the Switch. Meaning this console that boasts about being able to compete with Microsoft and Sony is running on tablet hardware. For the longest time, Atari was extremely vague about everything surrounding the system, and yet expected people to donate money to a project they knew nothing about. That is, until this year at GDC, where Atari announced that the Atari box will now be called the Atari VCS, and showed off the controller. And that's about it. They didn't show off any games, they didn't show off the UI, they just renamed the system and showed off a controller that looks a depressing amount like some random off-brand PC controller. The more Atari shows of its system as time goes on, the more this whole thing feels reminiscent to the Coleco Chameleon disaster. The more recent crowdfunding project that Atari is working on is a Nintendo Switch port of their free-to-play Roller Coaster Tycoon mobile game, Roller Coaster Tycoon Touch. That's not even the most ridiculous part. You should hear what the backers of this project are getting. First off, due to this being on a very specific crowdfunding site called Start Engine, they managed to set the minimum amount of money people can put towards this project to $250. If you were to donate the minimum amount, which might I remind you is $250, you get your name on a website thanking you for giving them $250 freaking dollars. The next reward is at $750, in which you would get, oh boy, a whole 25% off the game at launch. For $750, you don't even get a copy of what was essentially a port of a free-to-play mobile game, but instead get a coupon for 25% off a game you can play on your phone for free. The final reward tier is a whopping $1,500. And what do you get for the price of a used car? A friggin' art book that you can buy at Barnes & Noble for $16. You can get a Salvador Dali painting for $1,200. The most bizarre thing is that apparently Atari has stated that even if the game doesn't get funded, then their stockholders will fund it anyway. So that raises the question. Why crowdfund it in the first place? The company is very open about the fact that they have the resources to fund and publish this game without any external help, so why try to raise additional funding? Well, outside of corporate greed, I have a theory. It's possible that Atari is using crowdfunding as a way to see how people feel about certain projects. The logic being that if they're willing to put money towards a project, then they're willing to purchase the finished project. It's also possible that the higher-ups in Atari don't have much faith in these projects and refuse to add sufficient funding behind them, and the lower divisions have to prove these projects are worthwhile, which leads to them resorting to crowdfunding. Of course, all of this is just playing devil's advocate, and my theory has more holes than Swiss cheese after being shot at with a machine gun. There's really no telling what the heck these people at Atari are thinking, since I don't really like the idea of big companies using crowdfunding, since it always comes off as extremely shady, and this is definitely no exception. I guess we'll all just have to wait all this out to see what happens. And until then, goodbye and stay nerdy, my friends.